Good morning, everyone. It is the half-hour mark, so we'll get started. Welcome to the Scaling the GovCon Mission Ready, Set, Grow session. Before we dive in, I have a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording this session, so we will share the link afterwards and send it out more broadly. At any point, you can use the Q&A bubble to submit questions as we go. But just a reminder that they will be recorded, so don't send anything very sensitive. I'll make sure that we've got questions either answered throughout the session or at the end of the session too, so we've got time to address them all. Quick intro from myself. I am the VP of Product and Partnerships at SBCC. At SBCC, Small Business Consulting Corporation, our focus is getting the right tech to the warfighter, and we host these monthly sessions as a way to get into some of the back office infrastructure operational problems that companies have, because those are actually what typically dictates the success of a company. Is how a company actually gets through a lot of these things can dictate success or failure in the space. We're joined today by two great leaders in the space, Marty McGann, who is CEO and founder at Premier Consulting and Integration, and Joe Young, who is president at GovCon-Pay. Marty and his team have spent years helping GovCons navigate transitions from commercial accounting to DCAA compliant systems. And Joe brings the critical human element perspective here, adding a wealth of knowledge about helping companies scale their most important asset, their people. So we've got both perspectives, the HR people side of things and the accounting financial infrastructure side, as we're going through how to scale your company to be ready to be fully compliant for GovCon needs. Between the two of them, we'll cover all sorts of different things. But again, if you have questions throughout, please feel free to ask questions, however tactical, as we go. Marty and Joe, it's great to have you both. To start us off, could you each give a quick overview of your backgrounds? Marty, let's start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So it's nice to meet everybody. I was a controller. I was a CFO for a couple different government contractors prior to starting PCI. I started in 2009 and kind of been rolling with this ever since. So we do support all aspects of ERP implementation, accounting services, human resources support, integration services, and technology. So it's great to meet everybody.
Thank you. And you, Joe?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Katie and the SBCC team for inviting to be here today. My name is Joe Young. I am the founder and president of GovConPay. We are the only outsourced payroll and human capital management provider that focuses exclusively on serving the government contracting marketplace. We're proud to now support nearly 400 government contractors across the U.S., headquartered in over 40 states, ranging from startups to clients with over 1,000 employees. And very proud to have SBCC as a client, Marty and PCI as a partner, and I'll publicly thank Marty here on this for introducing us to SBCC and then bringing us all here together today. So great to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Excellent. Excited to have you both. So jumping right into some juicy questions. Marty, you've worked with GovCons of all sizes. What would you say is the biggest challenge that you see a company struggle with when they're first entering the federal world?
Well, for those entering federal contracting with an established business, maybe a commercial business, the level of oversight is significantly different, right? The government really cares about your financials. As a small business, and as a commercial business myself, the importance of our, the detail and in our bookkeeping is very important, but it doesn't drive the train towards bidding our jobs and things like that. Whereas in government contracting, there's a unique interest by the government in very granular accounting. So that's probably the first thing. The second thing is for those that are starting out, most people start a business because they're really good at a trade or a craft, right? Not that they're really good at accounting or finance or payroll. So that's a place where people tend to not really know what they're getting into. So that ask a lot of questions. There's some stuff that you need to really understand about running a business, which is different than building a product or doing the thing you're really good at. So that running the business part of owning a business is definitely different. All that being said, though, I think that if you are, whether you're starting out in government contracting directly as a first thing or you're making the transition, either way, one thing that is a little bit different is the profit margin. So government is not going to match the profit margin you're seeking in the commercial space. So just keep that in mind as you're starting that venture. There is a cash flow exercise that you need to go through to really understand how you're going to bring money and how you're going to pay bills, because it does take some time to get paid, albeit you will get paid pretty much every time.
Significant challenge. Thank you. Joe, from the labor and payroll perspective, do you find that to be the same challenge, or do you have a different one that you see companies struggle most with?
No, I think Marty's the same. I mean, there's obviously a lot of correlation. A lot of the being compliant from an HR and a payroll perspective is a challenge. I think in all industries that you deal with. Especially Marty and I are dealing with somebody from outside the United States right now. We forget, especially in the payroll and the HR space, it's not just federal regulation. We got 50 states, and they all have their own spin on different things. So that creates obviously unique challenges. There is sometimes some unique things to the government contracting in the HR perspective. If you get into certain types of contracts with things like Service Contract Act and the Davis-Bacon Act, that can create some unique requirements from a payroll perspective and a time perspective. But a lot of the challenges do kind of transfer. I think one of the big things that we see with government contractors that creates challenges that really encourages them to outsource, look for partners, or look for better systems is more than some of the commercial businesses that maybe our sister company deals with. Our government contractors tend to have, as they grow, especially a workforce that is spread out, and it is all over the United States. So it's not uncommon to have, a 60-person company that has employees in 20 states. So that creates a real compliance burden and a challenge for smaller payroll or HR staffs to manage the compliance landscape around that type of a larger landscape of, we always joke, God forbid you just hired somebody in California. I mean, you need to rewrite all your policies usually to apply to everybody to deal with that. There's taxing, from a payroll tax perspective. You get into the state of Pennsylvania, people don't realize, hey, there's 3,000 local jurisdictions for payroll in Pennsylvania. So that's one of the unique challenges you see with our GovCons is they have smaller staffs, but then they have wider disbursement of employees, which really creates a compliance burden, both in HR and payroll, that maybe requires them to reach out to get some support to outsource that more than maybe a local company who's, in 2 states. Because that can really increase that burden.
Makes sense. Thank you. Government contracting is fundamentally a project-based business. Marty, from a systems perspective on the finance piece, what are some specific changes that you think companies need to implement to meet the requirements of cost tracking and audit readiness?
Yeah, that's a good question. The way we approach business before government is very much at like a company level profit and loss. So, this is how much we billed our customers for, this is how much we paid in salary, this is how much we paid in, non-salary expenses and then profit, right? Within government contracting, we have to be a little bit more specific about not just company-wide profit and loss, but also project-based profit and loss. So every transaction that you have in your accounting needs to be associated to a job to remain. I don't want to spend the whole time talking about DCA compliance, but like to remain compliant, whether you need to be right now or you plan to be later, it's a really good practice to pick a line in the sand and start recording things with a project code in mind. So that project could be a billable project. It could just simply be an overhead expense or a direct expense of G&A or a fringe benefit. but just putting a little bit of extra care into those transactions will help you as you get a little further down the road. The one thing I will offer, and it's kind of parlays into Joe a little bit, but one thing I will offer is that as you build out your offering for your government contracts, one of those things is going to be benefits. And it is a habit among small businesses to offer incredibly rich benefit plans. And what I mean by rich is you basically, as an employer, pay for everything. That's not necessarily bad. However, you need to really think about those costs that you cannot control. So 401k is a great cost because you can control how much you contribute. Health insurance, you have next to no control over. So it's very, very difficult to maintain like 100% paid health insurance, as an example. It's very difficult to retain that benefit over scale. So if you're going to build a benefit program, it has to be one that it's not going to make you non-competitive as you grow. And the other thing I'll say, just as a business owner, right, it's much easier to give people things than it is to take them away. So as you're devising that plan, right, it's the same thing with PTO and leave, right? There's people that want to give very generous PTO and leave offers to, especially senior people in the company. That's great. Just be mindful that PTO is a paid out on exit expense, right? So that's a cash expense. So there's a lot of things that you need to just think a little further down the road. And I know as a small business starting out, and when I was starting out, hiring people as a small company is incredibly difficult because you don't have the street credit. You don't have the risk of joining a small business is higher than joining an established large company. You can always remind folks that, hey, we have this 3-year contract, we have a 5-year contract. So, most people don't stay at companies more than 5 years these days. So, you've got 5 years of, provided you do a good job, 5 years of insurance that this job will be here for you. And I think that is a better story than, hey, we're going to give you all these benefits to stick around, because ultimately what will happen is in year 3, if you have to recompete that project, someone's going to come in with a lower wrap rate associated with how they issue benefits and how they run their business. And it's going to make you, non-competitive from a financial perspective. So I know this was a lot, but I think yes, the project-based business costing is important, but structuring the non-project costs that are indirect in nature in a scalable way is going to make that project-based business successful.
Got it. Joe, Marty touched a little bit on the benefits side, but from your perspective, given the project-based requirements of working with the government, what other things should companies consider in payroll and time tracking on a daily basis?
Well, first, I'll echo what Marty said, because he said 3 years down the road, and what a lot of small businesses struggle with now too is that 3 years down the road, the companies have been getting 15, 20, 25% increases to those benefits. So what looked like something was, hey, this is inside our budget and, doesn't damage our rep rate, in year 1 and year 4, all of a sudden becomes a much more challenge. So it's great advice from Marty of, trying to manage those. And I'll just say too that, and one thing we've talked about, and I know Marty and I both really try to advise clients is experts in all the different areas out in the marketplace. We don't necessarily get into the benefits and the insurance side of it, but we have partners that do that. And just like I look to Marty for expertise in the ERPs and the accounting side, because he's in this space, it's important to find insurance experts and other experts in banking or other things that you do that are also experts in that space, so they understand some of these unique requirements that can be different from commercial, typical commercial providers. Going back to, what Marty said in the project base, and you mentioned time, one of the things we recognized early on is, we have a full human capital management suite. And as you said, we like to kind of position ourselves as the people side of the equation, to marry ourselves very closely with the project-based side of your time expense, your accounting, that project-based ERP. as Marty said, so it's so important to get into managing that project-based business. Time is a very important part of that. We learned early on our product actually has a commercial time system to it. And over the years, people have been like, hey, can we see your time system? And I'm like, no. They're like, well, why not? We want it in the same system. And I have to remind them, hey, it's a commercial product. It's not purpose built to meet the DCAA requirements that you're going to have as a government contractor, and you want tied into this project-based business that you're building and ties tightly into your county. And those are the areas that Marty and his team, and with those ERP systems, are the experts to help stand those up. Where we've tried to add value again is how we can then unify that side of the equation with our people side through integrations, through understanding, and kind of through partnership to kind of tie that all together and kind of build infrastructure so organizations can grow on from there, because as they start to grow quickly, it becomes harder and harder to do that. But those are, I think, the key parts of tying into the two elements together is where we really look to collaborate and add value.
Great segue. So thinking about infrastructure and software, at some point it becomes a necessity for scale. Joe, I'll start with you.
Yep.
What headcount or maybe even contract volume do you start to see manual HR and payroll systems break down?
Yeah, I'll definitely do it. I'm in the world of looking at headcount. That's how we kind of measure organizations. And I think it can break down sooner than you think. And I think the sooner you can address it, the better. I think one of the things that we see every day, and I said we've done the first payroll for companies that are now 250 clients, 250 employees are kind of our favorite success stories. And we deal with clients all along kind of the maturity model. But as you look at companies, and let's say particularly under 50 employees, very commonly a situation that we see is they're still maybe utilizing QuickBooks as their accounting system. They've got a time system that's a commercial time system that maybe integrates with QuickBooks. Then we look at them and they've got a payroll provider. Then their broker gave them a piece of software to enroll their employees in benefits. And then they have maybe a recruiter who went out and found a piece of software they'd like to help them recruit people. And then they're like, well, we're trying to do performance evaluations each year. And we're tracking those just in SharePoint right now. So we see very disjointed solutions that, to your question, Kate, lead to a lot of manual processes. And a great way to kind of get at that a lot of times is we'll say people, when we're doing discovery calls, it's like, hey, you just hired a new employee. How many systems are you going to input? How are you going to put that new employee into? And they're like, well, I think there's 6 different systems, that we're going to have to put those employees into. So I tell people a lot of times, pay is in our name. At the end of the day, payroll is the one core service offering we have to do, and we can layer all of our HR technology and benefits and performance and learning management on top of that. But we see very much, I tell people, I think we're more kind of in the HR process re-engineering business. We have to do payroll every 2 weeks. It's important. It has to be accurate. But how we really add value to organizations is, hey, how can we get these systems either unified? A lot of times we're trying to get down to 2 systems. Again, us being the people side of the equation with your payroll, HR, recruiting. And then Marty's looking, Marty, I don't know how many clients a year Marty brings off of QuickBooks and helps them make that migration to, one of the best in breed DCA compliant ERP systems. So that's usually where we're trying and where we collaborate a lot, saying, hey, Marty's trying to get that finance side of the house upgraded and a good infrastructure for growth. We're trying to do all this stuff on the people side. And then can we tie those 2 systems together through integrations again? So we see our clients grow fast. We love it when they're like, hey, I just won a contract. We just went from 25 to 75 employees in 30 days. Well, you want those pieces in place to onboard those employees and have that to handle that quick growth. I tell people it's hard to change the tires on the car when it's doing 200 miles an hour, like in turn 4. Let's get those pieces in place so when the good news comes, the infrastructure is ready there, both on the finance and the payroll side of the house to grow with it and meet the new requirements.
That's helpful. Thank you. Lobbing it over to you, Marty, what do you see as the trigger points for upgrading the ERP systems and getting companies off of QuickBooks?
Well, no, I think ever since the cloud became a thing, um, the barrier to entry for ERP has continued to lower, right? So, before everything had to be on a server in your office, you need an IT person or a staff and a lot of help. Um, that's become, the barrier to entry into software has become very low, right? In many cases, you can just sign up online, right? Look at how many softwares you can just go and, go online, put your name in, and get a free trial, or put your credit card in and get a free trial. Um, so that's gotten a lot easier. Recently, obviously, AI has taken a pretty big step forward, and there are a lot of people thinking like, "Hey, maybe I can just use AI for everything." So um, that's it. Where that is going to help is in the transition from like where you are today to an ERP system. And like, for example, like we were able to build a tool leveraging AI to accelerate things, but we were able to build a tool to extract data out of QuickBooks and drop it into the ERP, right? So that you no longer have to create spreadsheets and do imports and things like that, right? So that's where AI is helping. I think AI is helping more on a transaction basis, but I would be leery about trying to replicate an ERP with AI instead, because the AI needs data and it needs the data organized in a way that makes sense. So what the ERP is really doing for you is organizing the data in a logical way, and putting all the data in the same place. But most importantly, it's also going to hit those compliance marks. So you're like, yes, could I take a Joe Young GovConPay payroll record and feed it into AI and create an invoice to a customer with my people and their hours? Absolutely. What do you do if someone's timesheet's wrong? Right? Like you don't have a process then in place to handle, in development called edge cases, right? Or exceptions. So you don't have a process in place to handle that. So yes, you could keep writing the AI and keep, iterating and get there. But it's not necessary, right? So what we're looking at is using an ERP system as the baseline, and then letting you and AI and technology make things faster and easier for you in operation and maintenance of the technology that you now have. So, from a specific line in the sand as to when to buy an ERP, as a business owner, I will tell you, cash is impossible to come by early on, right? So, like when you should buy it and when you can buy it are two different things usually. The sooner the better is going to be my general answer. When you feel you have the cash to invest, I will tell you that when I hit 10 people, like 10 full-time employees, it started to feel like the thing was held together by spider webs until I was able to put something in place, especially for job-based time tracking, and then, billing customers based on those jobs, the amount of time you're going to spend in spreadsheets and building stuff that's going to get exponentially more. If you do, in Joe's example, you win that 35 person or 40 person project. Now you have to take 40 timesheets and get all that data into invoicing. And that's going to take you all weekend because you're not going to have time to do it otherwise. So I think that's the point. The sooner you can do it, the better, knowing that cash is important. But yeah, and I will also tell you that they're not as expensive as you'd think. So, for a small business, there's tons of programs. The pricing is pretty reasonable. They're not asking for $10 and $15 and $20,000 for companies of 10 employees to get into these kinds of systems. It's significantly less. So don't be afraid to ask, at any point in your size or your scale, what's best. And obviously the cost to migrate to one of those systems is going to be less the sooner you do it, right? The less data, the less people, the less change management kind of stuff you have to go through in your business process. The one thing I'm going to add here as an aside is that if you are going to do any kind of system, you have to also look it in a very real lens. This isn't meant to hurt anyone's feelings. You have to look like really truthfully at the people you have running your finance and accounting department and your payroll and HR, and make sure that they're up to the task. Whether they're an outsourced team you use, or whether they're somebody in-house that you've brought in, or maybe it's someone you know, or whatever the case may be, there's a time and a place for friends and relatives and stuff to help you with your business. And then there's becomes like an inflection point. And if you're saving money by doing that now, you will pay later. It's never not happened. So I would just, if you're going to make that choice as a business owner, that's great to make the choice to make a move like this, but you have to have your team on board. And if they're not on board, you also don't want them to stop the business from growing, which is what that will do. So it doesn't mean they're not a good fit for the company. It means maybe they're not the best fit for that particular task. But if you have that conversation first, you don't have to have it with someone like me later, because you're going to have that talk. So it's easier to get it out of the way before everyone's really uncomfortable than after everyone's in pain. Because I will add that if the person doesn't want to do it, they're dying to tell you. They're just afraid to say it. So like they're miserable. They're miserable too.
I think that's a juicy piece that's not often talked about. Switching HR.
Well, one thing, Katie, I'd just like to add
to
what I just said is to his point of like trying to, do it sooner rather than later. And, people was like, oh, that's self-serving for you guys to say. But I think the one thing I would say is, whether it's Marty doing, ERP implementations with like a Dell Tech Cost Point and ours with the payroll and the HRIS, our teams have collaborated. I know we both strive to meet our clients where they are kind of at that point. And I know we very much, I think Marty too, that the products and the solutions we can bring can get really wide and really deep, really intimidating, and can get really expensive and maybe be not what you need everything to start. So I know we always look to the same as Marty, like take a crawl, walk, run approach with our clients. When you are that starting business, what are the things you need now to get those pieces in place? We don't need to be worried about, putting in a performance management system or a learning management system when you're 10 people or these other things, but let's get the core blocking and tackling, get that, and then grow with you. So you're an investment level, and then we can invest in those things down the road. And I think the same is true on Marty's side as far as different feature and functionality that as you grow, you can build and you can implement. Neither of us want to see our clients, overwhelmed with cost and have a bunch of shelfware there that a lot of times they don't have the people, to Marty's point, to understand how to run it and support it. So there are opportunities to take that crawl, walk, run approach, I think, with the right partners.
I think you both touched on an important point, is the dread maybe that comes with, oh, this is required, this is going to be challenging. I don't know that I have the team in place that's ready to make this transition, or that they'll be willing to. Let's think through the positive side. What are some unexpected, perhaps, benefits that companies can see coming from this change that they may not have even known was going to happen? Maybe Joe, you first on the HR aspect.
So just so I understand where your question, Kate, the change in moving into the government contracting versus commercial world?
Making the system change and additional efficiencies that may be unlocked that weren't expected.
Yeah, I think, efficiencies is obviously the key word. That's what we're just always looking for. Every engagement we go into with a prospective new customer is a deep discovery conversation about how are you doing things today. That's what we want to unlock, and then just figure out, hey, what's a better way to do that? Hopefully, a lot of times utilizing software as a way of doing that. I say, we're in the business of eliminating manual processes, get rid of Excel docs, get rid of things in SharePoint. Not always necessarily looking to necessarily get rid of people, but how to redeploy people. To do things more efficiently, onboard employees more efficiently. As Marty said, you don't want to grow and then you're doing that invoicing, over the week, or those 40 timesheets you're trying to get in. So it's certainly all about creating efficiency, and that efficiency obviously goes back to these tighter profit margins that you have in this space. So those efficiencies are critical to continue to grow and scale your business, in a more profitable way. So That's definitely there's software tools, and then as Marty said too, on our side as well, AI is becoming such a bigger part of the conversation in the HR world. It's just you kicked off really, okay, we're in the people side of the business. And these government contractors, it's all about people. Hey, I want a contract. I got 30 people I need to place. Where am I going to find these people? So recruiting and applicant tracking tools, super, super important. Some of the first HR products that AI embedded into them is you get hundreds of resumes coming in. We can use AI tools now that you put in. These are the things that I'm looking for. Here's the keywords. Hey, bring to the top and score for me these 100 applicants, because I don't have time to go line by line through 100 applicants. But I can use AI to help me, get the top 10 best prospects based on this to save my time and find the better talent. Great use of time. We're seeing great tools. The one thing we see on our side too, and again, goes back to these margins. Government contractors, they tend to be really slow in hiring HR staff, especially the emerging ones. We've been to a lot of, going to some meetings and you've got maybe a founder and a COO. It's like, who's your HR person? Like, well, I kind of do the benefits piece. I kind of do this piece. We kind of share it. And I'm like, well, neither of your HR professionals. You're in like 4 states. What are some ways that we can, efficiently help in those areas? We've got neat tools now. A lot of HR people spend their time every day, HR managers, answering the same questions over and over about policies. Tools now that employees can go in and be like, hey, what's the time off policy? Is this an allowable expense? Through AI, you can load those documents and your HR software can now answer those questions, can resource those documents. So you can load it in and through a chat, come back to the employees and be like, hey, that is not allowable expense based on the policies that your company has put forth. Saves countless hours and time of redundant answering the same question. So tools and AI definitely bringing a lot to creating those efficiencies and helping with those profit margins.
Marty, anything that you'd like to add from your perspective on that?
I think software builds structure. So one of the things I like about putting systems in place is that it gives you rails to drive on. So you don't create stuff that's crazy. And it might not seem crazy to you at the time, but it will be crazy when you try to scale it. So I think software builds scalability and gives those that are kind of inventing a company as they go ways to understand like what's business normal, right? Because if the software doesn't do it out of the box, it's probably not a business normal practice. So you don't have to invent it. Just take a look and see what's there. I think that's probably the best. That's like one of the best things about putting these things in place sooner than later is you don't have to like retool a whole bunch of things later. That would probably be my favorite if I had to pick one.
And Marty, what you say too, that's one of the reasons in using products that are purpose built for the government contracting space and DCA compliance, those guardrails are there. And I think we both see sometimes where people trying to take commercial products and say, well, I can just continue to use that. To your point, the guardrails are there then, and then they can get themselves in trouble. And then they're coming to you and saying, hey, we need to fix it. And then it's a heavier lift.
Yeah, the more things you're pulling out of your current systems to do spreadsheets or do separate things in an offline way probably means that your product isn't really designed for what you're doing. Yeah. Right. So, the hard things should be easy with purpose-built systems.
Makes sense. Shifting gears for a minute, I want to talk briefly about the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, CMMC. Requirements are coming up on everyone's tongue now. I'm curious to hear from each of your perspectives how you're advising clients to plan, prepare for these changes. Marty, if you'd like to take it first.
Obviously CMMC now is in, if not every contract, most contracts at some level, right? And as a non-government contractor, the same thing with DCA, right? There's, we're limited to what we can actually get approved, but for software, in general, what I tell people is that if you can exclude platforms from your security bubble by not putting CUI in them, then you're better off for it, right? So I think having a really good feel and understand for what is CUI from your customer, and excluding that data from as many systems as you can is going to put you in a better position. Because as you grow the footprint that falls in that CMMC envelope, right, the cost for audits goes up, the cost and expense for the products goes up, right? So just looking at Microsoft, because most folks are probably using Microsoft for email, right? Your Microsoft High Cloud is significantly more expensive than a standard, right? So we have companies with two. We have companies that have one high cloud for certain people in the company and a standard one for others where it's not necessary. So do what you can to exclude areas that don't need to be in there. I think in a lot of cases, people right now are in the better safe than sorry mode. So just put everything in there, and then we'll just deal with it. If someone says, "Hey, do you want the high or the regular?" Everyone just clicks high automatically because they know they're safe then, which is a smart thing to do, right? If you're not going to do the research and take the time to figure it out, it is a better safe than sorry scenario. But I would say just take a minute and figure out if you need that in your bubble or not. Because if you don't, it's cheaper, right? In a world of a very competitive landscape where price matters, the more things you don't raise the price of, the lower your rates. The lower your rates, the more competitive you are, the more likely you are to win. So I think it's, use it where necessary, but be diligent in your discovery.
Great answer. Thank you. Joe, thinking about your clients, how are you preparing them, advising them on CMMC changes?
Yeah, it's definitely, once it was announced in the fall that, the flag was planted and the deadline for the coming year, it became obviously that much more real and more of a priority. And I think, Marty is dead on that. I think people need to take a very strategic approach to doing this because of the cost, the time, the impact it can have. Interesting for us, I've had to answer a lot of questions over the past few years as they look at me. They're like, so, your name is GovConPay. So your product is, what level CMMC do you have? And are you in, the FedRAMP cloud? And so I've had to go and get legal opinions and say, hey, I'm not a government contractor. I'm an HR payroll platform. I don't have CUI. That doesn't apply to us. We still have obviously very high security requirements with regards to PII and all the other things we need to do as far as single sign. But that's something we've had to address more and more as far as what applies to us and whatnot. But then it comes into, Marty and I have spoken a lot about this. One of the things that Marty and I have partnered on are integrations and integrating our systems with a system like a Deltek CostPoint who provides that, and how, Marty's built some solutions so we can take advantage of integrations, but not jeopardize what needs to be done in those environments. So it definitely, has changed the conversation, added to the conversation, and people have asked more and more about it as far as where it applies and where it doesn't. And the one thing we've certainly seen too is it's become obviously a priority. So where, people are maybe, they've been looking at, we're talking about, hey, you need to make that move to the DCA compliant ERP. Maybe you need to upgrade your HR, your payroll, your human capital management project. And now they're like, wow, I got this new thing I need to do, and it's not cheap. So it's becomes another competing priority for not just dollars, but time. Because I think that's the one thing as I talk to either clients or other service providers that are trying to deliver these audits and help people, check the box. These are not 6-day things you do over a weekend. These are 6 to 9 month processes of going through and getting this completed. And it's I think there's a lot of question of all the people that need to do it by next fall. Is there enough time and money and people who can actually do the certifications to kind of get everybody there by that point? So it's definitely had an impact on prioritization for small mid-sized government contractors who are trying to figure out this path forward here.
Quick plug, if you're looking for someone to help you get CMMC certified, I would be happy to be a resource for you afterward. I'm sure Joe and Marty also have great resources to connect you with. I'm getting into my last few questions, so if you have questions, please feel free to submit them and I'll make sure that they get answered as well. Joe and Marty, curious if you could give one operational area or really hefty piece of advice for companies, let's say, breaking that $10 to $50 million journey, what would it be?
Go ahead, Marty. I'll let you start.
One thing. I think at that dollar threshold, like say you're in the 50, right? So you're getting close to 50. Your journey as a small business is coming to an end. So I would advise that you have the right systems, the right people, the right contacts to start to, like you're kind of going to go, you're moving up to varsity, right? My kids are in school. So you're moving up to varsity sports. Right. So this is where it's going to go down. So, you got to be ready. So make sure you've invested in the right things. Make sure you're mentally prepared to compete at a high level. Make sure your benefit package is good. Your rate structure is solid and you're ready to compete both technically, but also from a cost perspective. You have the resources in house to deliver, because that would be perceived as a risk.
Great answer. Over to you, Joe.
Yeah, and I think going to maybe the smaller end, the $10 million side too. I think I've talked to some very successful business owners, people that have some very successful exits out of the government contracting space, and it's interesting. Many of them have said to me, looking back when I was small and I was trying to grow, the thing they try and communicate to people in that space is don't try and do everything on your own. Don't be too penny wise, pound foolish at the beginning. One of them told me, I would have outsourced way more than I kind of did at that point. It's, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that expensive, but the efficiencies that I got, and the ability to have, as Marty said, the right rails in place early to then grow on them, I think really important. Because I think Marty sees a lot of times that people end up spending three times more, $10 million 2 years down the road to fix and get back to where they were, where with some minor investment and that crawl, walk, run approach, I think you can get yourself in a better place to be profitable and get those right places the earlier that you do that. And again, I think there's a great ecosystem out there of service providers, not just in the areas that Marty and I focus on. Marty and I joke, we probably just see each other at conferences. We travel all over the country so I see all the same people in different cities. But there's an amazing ecosystem that's not as big as you think of people out there that are in this market just to support, I think, the people that are on the call today. And finding those right partners and how you can tap them is really critically important, because there is specialized subject matter expertise. If you're coming out of commercial, you can save yourself a lot of time and money if you kind of get some of the right good advice early on in the process.
One last question for each of you. Excellent. You've convinced us that we need to change our systems and mature ourselves over time. What kinds of questions should companies be asking vendors as they're evaluating them? And maybe even a chance to share a little bit more about your own services and how you can help. Joe, you want to take it first?
Sure. Well, I think
Joe, you get to go first this time.
Okay.
The easier one than the last one game.
Yeah. Well, and if this is self-plug time, there's a reason I named my company GovCon-Pay. it gets really quick to the point that, hey, this is the area that we're focused on. And I think it kind of just reiterates what I just said. I do think it's important to find people that work in this space every day, and are working, with leaders, CFOs, HR people in the government contracting space, and having that subject matter expertise of what's unique to this space, what some of their unique requirements and what some of their unique challenges will be. But I also think, and it's part of the reason, Marty, on our call today is allowing us to collaborate with the other service providers. I think it's very common that we find in the added value we get into new engagements is we start asking people about, like, well, hey, who are you working with, the outsourced accounting, or who did your implementation of this? Who's your banker? Who's your benefits broker? And it's not uncommon that we're like, well, we know all those people. I was talking to them yesterday. We're working with them on 2 other clients. And I do think clients get better results when their team of advisors can collaborate and can talk and kind of work with them kind of collaboratively on the journey. And I think that's one of the things I really enjoy about this space. And I think how we differentiate ourselves is being able to bring that collaborative process and other relationships to kind of work together to help a client meet their goal.
Thank you for that. Just a quick note, SBCC has been a very happy client, so thank you to Joe for all your hard work. Marty, would love to hear your same answer. And then for all our attendees, this is your last chance to ask questions before we close out too.
Yeah, so I have 2 things. If I'm going to ask one question of providers, right, it's going to be about connectivity. This is a really exciting time in mind to be part of, to be looking at systems and scaling a business, because this is the first time ever where the expectation is connectivity, right? So, you want to have systems that can talk to each other. You want to have systems that work together so that you can work less, right? And if you do that, then you can focus on the 2 things that I think will define your business, right? One is going to be delivering to the customer, which you are all probably very good. So we need you to focus on that, right? On your infrastructure. And then is building your brand and your culture, right? So, as government contractors, there's little to differentiate government contractors. You need to invent those things, and build some place that people want to come to work. And then you will get good people and they will take care of things for you. So I'll leave it at that.
That's great. Thank you very much for both joining this morning. It's been great to have your expertise on the call. Thank you for being so candid in all of your answers as well. Hopefully helpful to our audience. If you're in the audience, thank you for joining. It's been great to have you. I think the takeaway here is simple. Infrastructure cannot be a last minute concern. It needs to be something that's addressed early and often and thoughtfully. Don't go it alone. Marty, Joe, and I are very happy to connect you with the broader ecosystem of specialists, whether that's CPAs, bankers, CMMC experts, but it's important to find people who understand the particular aspects of your industry and scaling within GovCon. I'll be sending out a follow-up with this recording and contact info so that you can get the resources you need. I really appreciate everyone joining. Thank you again, Marty and Joe, for your help here. And I hope everyone has a wonderful Wednesday.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.